The wedding planner's binder hit the marble table with a sound that echoed through the country club's private event room. And Sophia Martinez wanted to throw it right back at the infuriatingly handsome man standing across from her, with his arms crossed, and that smug expression plastered on his face. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice sharp and professional despite the frustration building in her chest. "The ceremony starts at 4, which means cocktail hour at 5:30, dinner at 6:30. That's how weddings work." The man, who had introduced himself as Marcus Ashford, best man and apparently someone who thought his opinion mattered more than her 15 years of experience, shook his head. "Ryan wants the ceremony at sunset. That's 7:15. Move everything back." "Ryan hired me 6 months ago and approved this timeline," Sophia said, flipping through her perfectly organized binder to show him the signed contract. "If he wanted sunset, he should have mentioned it before we booked the photographer, the caterer, and the string quartet." Marcus leaned forward, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something warm and masculine that made her pulse quicken in a way she absolutely did not appreciate. "I've known Ryan since we were roommates at Yale. He's mentioned wanting a sunset ceremony at least a dozen times. Maybe if you actually listen to what your clients want instead of forcing them into some cookie-cutter template, you'd know that." Heat flooded Sophia's cheeks, and she had to resist the urge to slap that smug look right off his unfairly attractive face. "Cookie-cutter. I've planned over 300 weddings, and each one has been uniquely tailored to my client's visions. Unlike you, I actually work for a living instead of just showing up to give unsolicited opinions." Something flickered in Marcus's dark eyes, something that looked almost like amusement, which only made Sophia angrier. Before he could respond, the door opened and her best friend Claire rushed in, her maid of honor dress bag draped over one arm and her phone pressed to her ear. "No, Mom. I told you the bachelorette party is adults only," Claire was saying, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that somehow still looked elegant. "You cannot bring Aunt Susan. I love her, but she drinks too much and tries to set me up with every single man she meets." She paused. "Yes, even at my own bachelorette party." Sophia felt her anger deflate slightly at the sight of her friend. Claire had been her roommate in college, her business partner for 3 years before Claire left to pursue teaching, and the closest thing to a sister she'd ever had. This wedding needed to be perfect, which was exactly why Marcus Ashford and his last-minute changes were driving her insane. Claire hung up and immediately zeroed in on the tension in the room. "What's wrong? Please tell me the venue didn't double-book us again." "No, the venue is fine," Sophia said, shooting Marcus a pointed look. "But apparently the best man thinks he knows how to plan a wedding better than the person you're paying to do exactly that." "Marcus!" Claire's face lit up, and she crossed the room to hug him. "When did you get in? Ryan said you weren't flying back from Singapore until tomorrow." "Finished the deal early," Marcus said, and his whole demeanor changed when he smiled at Claire. The smugness disappeared, replaced by genuine warmth that transformed his face from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. "Wouldn't miss my best friend's wedding week. Although I'm starting to think Ryan might murder his wedding planner before we make it to the ceremony. He's trying to change the timeline 3 days before the wedding," Sophia interjected, refusing to let Marcus paint her as the villain. "Everything is booked, everything is paid for, and everything is confirmed. We cannot just shift the entire schedule because Ryan allegedly mentioned something about sunset." Claire bit her lip, glancing between them. "He did mention the sunset thing, like a lot. I thought Sophia knew and had worked it out somehow. Sophia's stomach dropped. You never told me that. I thought Ryan did. Claire's eyes widened. Oh God, this is my fault. I should have said something when we did the final walkthrough last month, but I assumed you two had already discussed it. Marcus raised an eyebrow at Sophia, and she wanted to scream. Instead, she took a deep breath and opened her binder again, scanning through the contracts and vendor agreements. Her mind was already running through possibilities, calculating costs and availability and backup plans. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I can fix this. The photographer charges extra for sunset shoots, but she's already planning to stay through 10. I'll call her and see if she can arrive earlier to capture getting-ready shots. The caterer might have an issue with the kitchen timeline, but if I can get them to prep the appetizers in advance, we can push cocktail hour back. The string quartet has another event at 9, so they'll need to leave by 8, which means we'll need a DJ or a backup playlist for the last hour of the reception. She was scribbling notes in the margins, her brain shifting into the problem-solving mode that had made her one of the most sought-after wedding planners in the state. The venue's event coordinator will need to adjust the room flip schedule. We'll have to light the ceremony space earlier since it'll be darker. Budget-wise, we're looking at probably $2,000 to $3,000 in additional costs. I'll cover it, Marcus said immediately. Sophia looked up, surprised. The bride and groom should approve any budget changes. Consider it my wedding gift, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. I'll transfer the money to your business account right now. What's the routing number? I don't need your money, Sophia said, bristling at the implication that she couldn't handle the situation. I need to talk to Ryan and Claire about what they actually want, and then execute a revised plan that works within the constraints we have. He's trying to help, Soph, Claire said softly, putting a hand on her arm. And honestly, if Marcus is willing to cover the extra costs, that would be amazing. We're already over budget with the flowers. Sophia bit back her immediate retort, reminding herself that this wedding was not about her pride. Fine, but I'm handling the logistics. No more surprises, no more last-minute changes, and definitely no more unsolicited opinions about how I do my job. She directed that last part at Marcus, who had the audacity to look amused again. Deal. But for the record, I wasn't criticizing how you do your job. I was advocating for my friend. By insulting my work. By pointing out that he had a preference you weren't aware of. Because no one told me. Which I didn't know until just now. They were standing closer than Sophia had realized. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark brown eyes and the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. Close enough that, when he spoke again, his voice was low enough that only she could hear it. Look, we got off on the wrong foot. Let me buy you dinner tonight, and we can go over the revised timeline together. I promise I'll be significantly less aggravating. Sophia blinked, thrown off balance by the sudden shift in his tone. That's not necessary. Maybe not, but I'm going to be around all week helping Ryan with last-minute groom stuff, and you're going to be managing everything else. We should probably figure out how to work together without wanting to kill each other. He had a point, even if she hated admitting it. And there was something in the way he was looking at her now, something that made her pulse skip in a way that had nothing to do with anger. Fine, she said, stepping back and tucking her pen behind her ear. But this is a working dinner. We're going over every single detail of the revised timeline, and you're going to help me make sure Ryan is actually on board with all of this. 7 o'clock, Marcus suggested. There's an Italian place on Main Street that's supposed to be good. I know the place, Sophia said, already making a mental note to go home and change out of her practical work blazer into something that didn't have coffee stains on the sleeve. Then she mentally scolded herself for caring what she looked like. This was a working dinner, nothing more. Claire was watching them with barely concealed interest, her blue eyes sparkling with something that looked suspiciously like matchmaking glee. You two are going to get along great once you stop trying to one-up each other. We're not trying to one-up each other, Sophia protested. Could have fooled me, Claire said cheerfully. Anyway, I need to steal Sophia for bridesmaid dress fittings. Marcus, you're coming to the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night, right? Wouldn't miss it, Marcus said, and when his eyes met Sophia's again, there was a promise in them that made her stomach flip. I'll see you at 7, Sophia. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and let Claire drag her out of the country club and into the parking lot where the afternoon sun was beating down on the pavement. Oh my God, Claire said the moment they were in Sophia's car. The tension between you two could have powered the entire building. There's no tension, Sophia said, starting the engine and cranking up the air conditioning. He's an arrogant know-it-all who thinks he can just waltz in and change everything 3 days before your wedding. He's also gorgeous, successful, single, and apparently interested enough to ask you to dinner. It's a working dinner. Sure it is, Claire said, grinning. That's why you're already planning what to wear. I am not. Sophia pulled out of the parking lot, trying to ignore the fact that she absolutely was. Tell me about the bridesmaid dress situation. Is your cousin still insisting on alterations? Claire let her change the subject, launching into a story about her family's drama with the wedding preparations. But Sophia's mind kept drifting back to Marcus, to the way he'd looked at her, to the dinner tonight, to the way her heart had raced when they were standing close enough to touch. She'd sworn off men 2 years ago after her ex-boyfriend had proposed to another woman 3 months after they'd broken up. She'd thrown herself into her business, building her reputation and her client list, until she was booked solid 18 months in advance. She didn't have time for relationships, didn't have energy for the kind of emotional vulnerability that came with letting someone in. And she definitely didn't have time for a man who challenged her at every turn, no matter how good he looked in an expensive suit. The dress fitting took 2 hours, and by the time Sophia dropped Claire back at her apartment, she had exactly 45 minutes to get home, shower, and make herself presentable for dinner. She told herself again that this was work, that she was meeting Marcus to discuss logistics and timelines, nothing more. But she still spent 20 minutes deciding between 3 different dresses, before settling on a simple navy wrap dress that was professional enough for a business meeting but flattering enough that she didn't feel frumpy. She left her dark hair down in loose waves, applied minimal makeup, and slipped on nude heels that added 3 inches to her 5'5" frame. The Italian restaurant was crowded for a Wednesday evening, full of couples and families, and the kind of warm, buzzing energy that came with good food and good company. Sophia spotted Marcus immediately. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and he looked unfairly attractive as he stood when she approached the table. "You're right on time," he said, pulling out her chair before she could object to the old-fashioned gesture. "I wasn't sure if wedding planners ran on their own time zone." "We run on everyone else's time zone," Sophia said, settling into her seat and accepting the menu from the hovering waiter. "Which means I'm usually early." They ordered falling into an awkward silence once the waiter disappeared. Sophia pulled out her tablet, determined to keep this professional, but Marcus spoke before she could launch into the revised timeline. "I owe you an apology," he said, his expression serious. "I came in hot this afternoon, and that wasn't fair to you. You're right that I don't know anything about planning weddings, and I shouldn't have implied that you weren't doing your job properly." Sophia hadn't expected that. "Oh, well, thank you, and I'm sorry for the cookie-cutter comment. That was unprofessional." "Was it wrong, though?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "Do you ever feel like you're just going through the same motions for every couple?" "No," Sophia said immediately, then reconsidered. "Maybe sometimes, but that's true of any job. The weddings themselves might follow similar structures, but the couples are always different. Their stories are different. What matters to them is different. What made you want to plan weddings?" Marcus asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice now, not the challenging tone from earlier. Sophia took a sip of water, considering her answer. "My parents had the worst wedding imaginable. They got married at City Hall in their lunch break. No family, no celebration, just a judge and two random witnesses they pulled off the street. My mom always said she regretted not having a real wedding, not having that one day where everything was perfect and everyone they loved was together." She paused as the waiter brought their appetizers, a capre salad they'd agreed to share. "When she got sick, when I was in college, she made me promise that I'd help people have the weddings they dreamed of. She said that marriage is hard and life is complicated, but your wedding day should be magic. So I started planning them." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression softer than she'd seen it all day. "Is your mom okay now?" "She passed away 8 years ago," Sophia said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice was. "But I like to think she'd be proud of what I've built." "I'm sure she would be," Marcus said gently. 300 weddings is impressive." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Sophia turned the question back on him. "What about you? What do you do when you're not flying back from Singapore and interfering with wedding timelines?" "I run a private equity firm," Marcus said, and there was something almost apologetic in his tone, like he was used to people's reactions to that information. "We acquire struggling companies, restructure them, and either sell them or keep them in our portfolio. It's not as heartless as it sounds." "I didn't say it was heartless. You were thinking it." Sophia couldn't help but smile. "Maybe a little. But then again, I don't know anything about private equity, so I'm not qualified to judge." "Fair enough," Marcus said, returning her smile with one that made her heart skip. "For what it's worth, I actually care about the companies we acquire and the people who work for them. The goal isn't to gut them and sell off the pieces. It's to make them viable and sustainable again." "That sounds lonely, though," Sophia said, surprising herself with the observation. "All that travel, all that restructuring. Do you ever get to stay in one place long enough to build something of your own?" Marcus's expression shifted, and for a moment she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "Not really, but that's the life I chose. And it's given me the freedom to do what I want, go where I want, be who I want. Does it make you happy?" The question slipped out before Sophia could stop it, too personal for a working dinner with someone she'd met only hours ago. But Marcus didn't seem to mind. He considered it seriously, twirling his wine glass between his fingers. "I don't know if happiness is the point. Success, achievement, building something that lasts, that's what drives me." "That sounds like a lonely way to live," Sophia said softly. Says the woman who planned 300 weddings but hasn't had one of her own. The comment hit closer to home than Sophia wanted to admit. How do you know I haven't been married? No ring, Marcus said, gesturing to her left hand. No tan line either, which means you haven't worn one recently, and Claire mentioned that you've been single for a while. Claire talks too much, Sophia muttered, but there was no heat in it. And for the record, being single is a choice, not a tragedy. I have a career I love, friends and family who matter to me, and a life that doesn't require a man to make it complete. I didn't say it did, Marcus said, holding up his hands in surrender. But I think we might have more in common than either of us wants to admit. We're both married to our work, both more comfortable with professional success than personal relationships, and both pretending that's exactly what we want. Sophia wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Because he was right, and that terrified her more than she wanted to acknowledge. Their entrees arrived, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Marcus told her about Ryan's college days, about the time they'd accidentally set off the fire alarm in their dorm trying to cook Thanksgiving dinner, about the night Ryan had met Claire at a mutual friend's party and announced that he'd just met the woman he was going to marry. Sophia shared stories from her favorite weddings, the couple who'd gotten married in an art museum surrounded by paintings, the groom who'd surprised his bride by learning to dance to their favorite song, the ceremony she'd planned during a hurricane when the power went out, and they'd lit the entire venue with candles. By the time dessert arrived, a tiramisu they split without discussing it, Sophia realized she was genuinely enjoying herself. Marcus was funny and thoughtful and surprisingly easy to talk to, when he wasn't being infuriating. He asked good questions, listened to her answers, and challenged her in ways that felt stimulating rather than threatening. We should probably talk about the actual timeline, Sophia said reluctantly, pulling out her tablet again. If we're really doing sunset ceremony, I need to confirm everything tonight so I can start making calls first thing tomorrow. They spent the next hour going over every detail, and Sophia was impressed by how seriously Marcus took it. He had notes from his conversation with Ryan, specific requests about music and toasts and the order of events, and he deferred to her expertise on everything logistical. Ryan wants me to give a toast during dinner, Marcus said, scrolling through his phone. But he also wants his dad to speak, and Claire's mom, and apparently 3 of her brothers are fighting over who gets to embarrass her most. We'll do a toast lineup, Sophia said, making a note. 5 minutes max per person, and I'll signal the band to start playing if anyone goes over. Trust me, wedding toasts are like speeches at the Oscars. Everyone thinks they'll be brief and memorable, but they always run long. 5 minutes isn't enough for everything I want to say about Ryan, Marcus protested. Then edit, Sophia said firmly. The guests don't need to hear every embarrassing story from college. Hit the highlights, say something heartfelt about Claire, and sit down. That's the formula for a great toast. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. You're good at this. I know, Sophia said, and for the first time all day she said it without defensiveness. That's why people hire me. I'm sorry I implied otherwise this afternoon. You already apologized. I'm apologizing again, Marcus said, and his hand was suddenly covering hers on the table, warm and solid and sending sparks up her arm. You're brilliant at what you do, Sophia. Anyone who spent 5 minutes with you can see that. She should pull her hand away. This was a working dinner, a professional meeting, nothing more. But she didn't move, didn't break eye contact, didn't do anything to stop the electricity building between them. I should go, she said finally, her voice not quite steady. "I have 1,000,000 calls to make tomorrow, and I need to be coherent for all of them." "Let me drive you home," Marcus offered, signaling for the check. "I have my car. Then let me walk you to it." They split the bill despite Marcus's protests, and Sophia led the way out of the restaurant into the warm evening air. Her car was parked 2 blocks away, and they walked in silence, the tension from earlier replaced by something else, something that felt dangerous and thrilling and completely inappropriate given that they'd met only 6 hours ago. "Thank you for dinner," Sophia said when they reached her car, fishing her keys out of her purse. "And for being reasonable about the timeline. I know you're just looking out for Ryan." "Thank you for putting up with me," Marcus said, and he was standing close again, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "And for being willing to fix something that wasn't your fault." "That's the job," Sophia said, but her voice came out breathless. "Still," Marcus said softly, "not everyone would have handled it as gracefully as you did." He was going to kiss her. Sophia could see it in his eyes, in the way he was leaning in the way her own body was swaying toward his, like they were magnets being pulled together. And God help her, she wanted him to. Wanted to feel his mouth on hers. Wanted to know if the spark between them would ignite or fizzle. Wanted to give in to the attraction that had been building since the moment they'd started arguing in the country club. But this was a terrible idea. He was the best man. She was managing the wedding, and Claire would never let her hear the end of it if she hooked up with Marcus 3 days before the ceremony. "I really do need to go," Sophia said, taking a deliberate step back and unlocking her car door. "I'll email you the updated timeline tomorrow once I've confirmed everything with the vendors." Something flickered across Marcus's face, disappointment maybe, but he recovered quickly. "Sounds good, and Sophia, I'm glad we got off on the wrong foot." "Why?" "Because making up is much more interesting than starting out agreeable," he said with a grin that made her stomach flip. Sophia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling as she slid into her car and started the engine. She could feel Marcus watching her as she pulled out of the parking space and drove away, and she allowed herself one glance in the rearview mirror to see him still standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking like something out of a romantic movie. This was going to be a very long week. The next morning, Sophia was on the phone before 7, calling in every favor and confirming every detail of the revised timeline. The photographer was thrilled about the sunset ceremony. The caterer grumbled but agreed to the new schedule for an additional $500. And the string quartet's manager promised to see if they could push their next event back by an hour. By noon, she had everything locked in, and by 2 she'd emailed the updated timeline to everyone involved, including Marcus. His response came back within 5 minutes. "You're a miracle worker." Ryan's ecstatic. "Thank you." She tried not to smile at the message, tried not to read anything into the fact that he'd added a personal thank you instead of just a professional acknowledgement. She had too much work to do to get distracted by a man, even one who made her pulse race and her brain short-circuit. The rehearsal dinner was at a private room in a steakhouse downtown, and Sophia arrived an hour early to make sure everything was set up correctly. The tables were arranged perfectly, the place cards were in order, and the slideshow of Ryan and Claire's relationship was queued up and ready to play during dinner. Claire arrived 30 minutes later with her mother and her 3 brothers, all of whom immediately tried to rearrange the seating chart until Sophia firmly redirected them. Ryan showed up with his parents and his younger sister, looking nervous and excited in equal measure. And then Marcus walked in, and Sophia's carefully maintained composure cracked just a little. He was wearing another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray with a light blue tie that brought out the gold in his eyes. His hair was slightly damp like he'd just showered, and when he spotted her across the room, his face broke into a smile that made her forget how to breathe. "Sophia," he said, crossing to her with long, confident strides, "everything looks perfect." "It's my job to make things look perfect," she said, trying to sound professional despite the fact that her heart was racing. "Did Ryan approve the timeline?" "He did more than approve it. He said you'd saved the wedding and that he's going to recommend you to everyone he knows." "Good," Sophia said, making a note in her ever-present binder. "Referrals are how I build my business." "All work and no play," Marcus murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "When's the last time you did something just for fun?" "I have plenty of fun," Sophia protested, even though she couldn't actually remember the last time she'd done something that wasn't work-related. "Name one thing." "I went to a movie last month." "By yourself or with friends?" "What does that matter?" "Sophia," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up from her binder. "When this wedding is over, I'm taking you out. Not a working dinner, not a professional meeting. An actual date where we talk about anything except timelines and vendors and seating charts." Her mouth went dry. "That's not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're the best man and I'm the wedding planner and this is a professional relationship." "The wedding will be over on Saturday," Marcus pointed out. "After that, we're just two people who happen to find each other interesting." "Interesting is a diplomatic word for infuriating," Sophia said, but she was smiling despite herself. "Same thing," Marcus said, grinning back. "So is that a yes?" Before Sophia could answer, Claire descended on them, her face flushed with happiness and pre-wedding stress. "Sophia, my cousin just texted that she's running late because of traffic. Can we hold dinner for 15 minutes? "Of course," Sophia said, immediately shifting back into work mode. "I'll let the restaurant manager know." "Marcus, can you help me rearrange the place cards so she's not walking into everyone already eating?" The three of them spent the next 20 minutes managing the minor chaos that came with any family gathering, and by the time everyone was seated and the dinner was underway, Sophia had almost forgotten about Marcus's question. Almost. She stood at the back of the room during the meal, monitoring everything with the practiced eye of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. The food came out on time, the slideshow played without technical difficulties, and the toasts were heartfelt without running too long. Marcus's toast was perfect. He talked about meeting Ryan on their first day of college, about the friendship that had sustained them through late nights studying and early morning rowing practices, and the ups and downs of building their careers. He talked about watching Ryan fall in love with Claire, about seeing his best friend become the best version of himself, about knowing that Claire was exactly who Ryan needed. "To Ryan and Claire," Marcus said, raising his glass, and his eyes found Sophia's across the room. "May you build something that lasts, something that matters, something that makes every challenge worth it." Everyone drank, and Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. Damn him for being good at this. Damn him for making her want things she'd convinced herself she didn't need. After dinner, as guests mingled and the restaurant staff cleared plates, Marcus found her again. "So about that date. You don't give up, do you?" "Not when I want something," Marcus said, and the intensity in his eyes made her shiver. "And I want to get to know you, Sophia. The real you, not the wedding planner version who's always in control and always 3 steps ahead. What makes you think there's any other version?" Sophia challenged. Because I see it, Marcus said simply. In the way you smiled during Ryan's mom's toast, in the way your eyes got misty during mine, in the way you look at Claire and Ryan, like you believe in the fairy tale, even though you've convinced yourself you don't. He was too perceptive, seeing too much, getting too close to walls she'd built carefully over the years. One date, Sophia said before she could talk herself out of it. After the wedding. If you still want to. I'll still want to, Marcus said with absolute certainty. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final fittings, vendor confirmations, and small emergencies that Sophia handled with practiced efficiency. A bridesmaid got food poisoning. The florist accidentally ordered white roses instead of cream. One of the groomsmen lost his tie and needed a replacement rush-ordered. Through it all, Marcus was there, somehow always appearing exactly when Sophia needed an extra pair of hands or a calm presence in the chaos. He picked up the replacement tie, charmed the florist into fixing the rose mistake at no extra charge, and personally drove the sick bridesmaid to the doctor to get medication. You're surprisingly useful, Sophia told him on Friday afternoon as they wrapped up the final rehearsal at the country club. I contain multitudes, Marcus said solemnly, then grinned when she laughed. Besides, I figure if I prove myself indispensable this week, you'll have to go on that date with me tomorrow night. I already said yes. I know, but I'm hedging my bets in case you change your mind. I don't change my mind, Sophia said, then reconsidered. Well, not often. They were standing in the ceremony space, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the golf course. Tomorrow at this time, Ryan and Claire would be getting married right here, surrounded by everyone they loved, and Sophia would be orchestrating it all from behind the scenes. Thank you, Marcus said softly, and when she turned to look at him, his expression was serious. For caring so much about getting this right, for putting up with my interference, for being incredible at what you do. You're welcome, Sophia said, and impulsively she reached out and squeezed his hand. And thank you for caring about Ryan enough to fight for what he wanted. Even if your methods were a little aggressive. Marcus laughed, his fingers intertwining with hers. My methods are always a little aggressive. It's how I built my company. Tell me about that, Sophia said, and she realized she genuinely wanted to know. Wanted to understand what drove him, what he'd built, who he was beneath the expensive suits and confident demeanor. So Marcus told her about starting his firm right out of business school with nothing but student loans and ambition. About the first company he'd acquired, a failing manufacturing plant in Ohio that everyone said was beyond saving. About spending 6 months living in a motel room near the factory, working alongside the employees to understand the business from the ground up, and finally figuring out how to make it profitable again. Everyone told me I was crazy, Marcus said, staring out at the golf course. Private equity is supposed to be about spreadsheets and profit margins, not about getting your hands dirty on the factory floor. But I couldn't fix something I didn't understand. And I couldn't ask people to trust me if I wasn't willing to work as hard as they did. How many companies do you own now? Sophia asked. 12 in our portfolio, 3 in active acquisition, Marcus said. And before you ask, yes, I'm aware that makes me a billionaire, but that's not why I do it. Sophia's breath caught. She'd known he was successful, but hearing him say it so casually was something else entirely. Why do you do it? Because every company I save is hundreds of jobs preserved, families that don't have to worry about losing their homes, Communities that don't have to watch their main employer disappear, Marcus said quietly. My dad lost his job when I was 12. He'd worked at the same company for 20 years, and they shut down the plant with 2 weeks' notice. We lost our house. We moved 3 times in 2 years while he tried to find work. I watched my mom cry herself to sleep every night, and I swore I'd never be that powerless again. So you became powerful enough to save other people from the same fate, Sophia said, understanding flooding through her. Something like that, Marcus said with a self-deprecating smile. But I don't want to talk about work anymore. Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with weddings or planning or being professional. Sophia thought about it, realized how little of her life existed outside of those parameters. I paint, she said finally. Badly, but I like it. There's something freeing about putting colors on a canvas and not worrying if it's perfect or matches someone's vision. What do you paint? Abstract stuff mostly. Emotions in color. It's therapeutic. I'd like to see your work sometime, Marcus said, and he sounded like he meant it. Maybe, Sophia said, suddenly shy, if you're good on our date tomorrow. I'll be excellent on our date tomorrow, Marcus promised, and the way he was looking at her made her pulse skip. They stood there as the sun set, hands still linked, talking about everything and nothing until Sophia's phone alarm went off, reminding her that she had 3 more things to check before she could call it a day. I should go, she said reluctantly. Big day tomorrow. The biggest, Marcus agreed, but neither of them moved. Finally, Sophia took a breath and stepped back, breaking the spell. I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure Ryan eats breakfast and stays hydrated. Grooms tend to forget the basics when they're nervous. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said with a mock salute that made her laugh. She was halfway to her car when he called out her name. She turned to find him jogging after her, and before she could ask what was wrong, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet, and over far too quickly, leaving her dizzy and breathless and wanting more. I've been wanting to do that since the moment you threatened to throw that binder at me on Wednesday, Marcus said, his thumb brushing across her cheek. Couldn't wait another day. Then he was walking back toward the country club, leaving Sophia standing in the parking lot with her heart racing, and her carefully maintained control completely shattered. She touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his mouth, and smiled. Tomorrow was going to be perfect. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with the kind of golden sunshine that made everything look like it belonged in a magazine spread. Sophia was at the country club by 7, overseeing the setup with military precision. Flowers were arranged, chairs were positioned. The arch for the ceremony was decorated exactly as Claire had envisioned. By noon, the bridal suite was full of excited chaos as Claire and her bridesmaids got ready. Sophia flitted between the suite and the rest of the venue, handling 100 small details while keeping a smile on her face and calm in her voice. She didn't see Marcus until 3, when she was doing a final check of the ceremony space and found him adjusting Ryan's tie in the groom's ready room. "How's he doing?" Sophia asked from the doorway. Marcus looked up, and his expression when he saw her made her breath catch. She'd changed into a simple black dress for the ceremony, professional but elegant, and the way Marcus's gaze traveled over her made her feel like she was wearing something far more revealing. "He's good," Marcus said, his voice a little rough. "Nervous but ready. How's Claire?" "Same," Sophia said, tearing her gaze away from Marcus to smile at Ryan. "She looks absolutely beautiful, and she's so excited to marry you." "I'm the luckiest man alive," Ryan said, and he sounded like he meant it. Sophia spent the next hour managing the final preparations, herding family members into place for photos, making sure the musicians were ready, coordinating with the catering staff. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around and the guests were seated, she was running on pure adrenaline and professional pride. The ceremony was perfect. Claire floated down the aisle in her lace gown, her face radiant as she locked eyes with Ryan. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and partnership. Ryan and Claire exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises that made half the guests cry. And when they were pronounced husband and wife and kissed to thunderous applause, Sophia felt tears slip down her own cheeks. This was why she did what she did. This moment, this joy, this absolute certainty that these two people were meant to be together. She caught Marcus's eye from across the ceremony space, and he was smiling at her with so much warmth that her heart ached. Cocktail hour flowed seamlessly into dinner. The food was delicious, the toasts were heartfelt, and the first dance was magical as Ryan and Claire swayed together while the singer performed their song. Sophia watched from the sidelines, monitoring everything, making sure the evening unfolded exactly as planned. "Dance with me," a voice said in her ear, and she turned to find Marcus standing beside her. "I'm working," Sophia protested. "Everything is perfect," Marcus said, taking her hand. "You've done your job brilliantly. Now let someone else handle the last hour and dance with me." He was right. The venue coordinator could manage the final details, and Sophia had been on her feet for 12 hours straight. So she let Marcus lead her onto the dance floor, let him pull her into his arms as a slow song started. "You're beautiful," Marcus murmured against her hair. "Have I mentioned that today?" "You haven't seen me today until an hour ago," Sophia pointed out, trying to ignore how good it felt to be in his arms. "Then I'm behind schedule," Marcus said. "You're beautiful. You're brilliant. You made my best friend's wedding absolutely perfect, and I can't wait for tomorrow when I get to take you on a proper date." "Where are we going?" Sophia asked, letting herself relax against him. "That's a surprise," Marcus said, "but I promise you'll like it, and there won't be a single timeline or vendor list in sight." They danced through 2 more songs before Sophia reluctantly pulled away, needing to check on the cake cutting. But for those few minutes, swaying in Marcus's arms while Ryan and Claire and their guests celebrated around them, she let herself imagine what it would be like to have this. To have someone who looked at her the way Ryan looked at Claire. To have someone who saw past the professional facade to the woman underneath. The rest of the reception flew by in a blur of cake and dancing and sparkler send-off. By 11, Ryan and Claire were off on their honeymoon. The guests were filtering out, and Sophia was overseeing the breakdown with the venue staff. "Go home," Marcus said, appearing at her elbow with her coat and purse. "I'll handle the rest of this." "You don't know how to handle the rest of this," Sophia protested. "Then I'll learn," Marcus said firmly. "You've been working non-stop for 14 hours. Let me take care of the final details and I'll text you when everything is done." Sophia wanted to argue, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. "Okay," she said finally, "but call me if there are any issues." "There won't be," Marcus promised, and he leaned down to press a soft kiss to her forehead. "Sleep well, Sophia. I'll pick you up at noon tomorrow." She was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, and she woke to bright sunshine and a text from Marcus. "Everything went perfectly last night. Venue is cleaned up, all vendors are paid, and Ryan and Claire texted from the airport that it was the best day of their lives. You're incredible. See you at noon. Wear something comfortable." Sophia smiled at her phone, then spent an absurd amount of time trying to figure out what something comfortable meant. She finally settled on jeans and a soft green sweater, minimal makeup, and her hair in a loose braid. Marcus showed up exactly at noon, dressed in jeans and a Henley that showed off his broad shoulders, and when he smiled at her, Sophia felt her stomach flip. "Ready?" he asked. "I don't even know where we're going," Sophia said, grabbing her purse. "That's the point of a surprise," Marcus said, offering his hand. She took it and let him lead her to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that was exactly what she would have expected him to drive. He opened her door, waited until she was settled, and then drove them out of the city and into the countryside. They talked easily during the drive, about the wedding, about Ryan and Claire's honeymoon plans, about anything and everything. And when Marcus finally pulled into the parking lot of an art studio, Sophia turned to him in surprise. "You said you paint," Marcus explained, looking almost nervous. "I thought we could take a class together. It's abstract painting, so there's no pressure to be good, just to have fun." Sophia felt something crack open in her chest, something warm and wonderful and terrifying. "You remembered." "I remember everything you tell me," Marcus said simply. "The class was perfect." They laughed over their terrible attempts at abstract art, splattered paint on each other's clothes, and competed over whose canvas was more ridiculous. The instructor praised Sophia's use of color and Marcus's composition, and by the end of the 2 hours, they both had paintings they'd created together. "This was amazing," Sophia said as they cleaned up their workspace. "I can't remember the last time I did something just for fun." "Then we need to do it more often," Marcus said, and there was promise in his voice. After the class, they drove to a small bistro for lunch, and then Marcus took her hiking on a trail that led to an overlook with a stunning view of the valley below. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, the things that scared them and the things that drove them. "I'm terrified of failure," Sophia admitted as they sat on a bench overlooking the valley. "Every wedding I plan, I'm convinced something is going to go catastrophically wrong and it'll be my fault. But nothing ever does," Marcus pointed out. "Not yet," Sophia said. "But that doesn't mean it won't happen eventually." "And if it does, you'll handle it," Marcus said, taking her hand, "because that's what you do. You solve problems and make things beautiful and care deeply about getting it right." "What about you?" Sophia asked, turning the question back on him. "What are you afraid of?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That I'll end up like my dad. That I'll build all of this success, but I'll be alone because I never made time for anything else. That I'll wake up one day and realize I have money and power and nothing that actually matters." "You have Ryan," Sophia said softly. "You have people whose jobs you've saved, companies you've turned around, a legacy that means something." "But no one to share it with," Marcus said, and when he looked at her, there was vulnerability in his eyes that made her heart ache. "Until maybe now." Sophia's breath caught. "Marcus, we've known each other for 4 days." "I know," Marcus said, "and I know this is fast and probably crazy. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you threatened me with that binder. You challenge me and frustrate me and make me want to be better. And I think you feel it too." He was right, and that terrified her. Because she did feel it, this pull toward him that was more than just attraction, more than just chemistry. She felt seen by him in a way she hadn't felt seen in years, maybe ever. "I do," she admitted quietly, "but I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in when my whole life is built around being independent and in control." "Then we'll figure it out together," Marcus said, cupping her face in his hands. No timelines, no pressure, no expectations, just us seeing where this goes. What if it doesn't work? Sophia whispered. What if it does? Marcus countered, and then he was kissing her again, deeper this time, with a passion that made her forget every reason why this was complicated. She kissed him back, pouring all her hope and fear and want into it, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Okay, Sophia said, her voice shaky. Okay, let's try this. But you have to promise me something. Anything. No games, no secrets, no pretending to be something you're not, Sophia said firmly. If we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. Deal, Marcus said, and he sealed it with another kiss that made her toes curl. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the hiking trails, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of something that felt like it could be real. And when Marcus drove her home that evening, he walked her to her door and kissed her goodnight like they had all the time in the world. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Marcus was in town for another month finishing up a deal, and he spent every spare moment with Sophia. They had dinner at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, went to art galleries and farmers' markets, took weekend trips to the coast where they walked on the beach and talked until the sun set. Sophia introduced him to her friends, her favorite coffee shop, the park where she went to clear her head. Marcus showed her his office, let her sit in on a meeting where he saved a struggling tech company from bankruptcy. Took her to visit the manufacturing plant in Ohio that had been his first acquisition. This is where it all started, Marcus said as they toured the factory floor, watching workers assemble components with practiced efficiency. That's Joe. He's been here 32 years. That's Maria, single mom of 3. She runs the quality control department. That's Thomas. He was going to lose his house when I bought this place. Now he's the shift supervisor and his son just graduated college. Sophia watched the way Marcus interacted with his employees, the way he knew their names and their stories, the way they respected him. This wasn't some ruthless corporate raider. This was a man who genuinely cared about the people whose lives he touched. You're not what I expected, Sophia said as they drove back to the airport. What did you expect? Someone colder, Sophia admitted. Someone more focused on profit margins than people, but you actually care. I told you, private equity doesn't have to be heartless, Marcus said, squeezing her hand. You just have to remember that every number on a spreadsheet represents a person with a family and dreams and bills to pay. Sophia fell a little more in love with him in that moment. They had their first fight 6 weeks into their relationship, over something stupid. Marcus had to fly to London for a week-long negotiation, and Sophia felt him pulling away, retreating into work mode in a way that reminded her too much of her ex-boyfriend. You're leaving again, she said when he told her about the trip, and she hated how needy she sounded. It's my job, Sophia, Marcus said, frustration creeping into his voice. You knew what I did when we started dating. I know that, Sophia said, trying to keep her emotions in check. But you've been traveling every other week for the past month, and I feel like I'm always the one waiting for you to come back. What do you want me to do? Marcus asked, running a hand through his hair. This is a major acquisition. I can't just hand it off to someone else. I'm not asking you to, Sophia said, but tears were burning her eyes. I'm just asking you to acknowledge that this is hard for me. That I'm trying to build something with you, but it feels like your work always comes first. Marcus's expression softened and he pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry. You're right. I get so focused on the deal that I forget about everything else, but you're not everything else, Sophia. You're the most important thing. Then act like it, Sophia said, her voice muffled against his chest. "What if you came with me?" Marcus suggested, pulling back to look at her. "To London. You could see where I work, what I do, and we'd still be together." "I have 3 weddings next weekend," Sophia said, then reconsidered. "But my assistant could handle the final day of coordination for 2 of them, and the third isn't until Sunday evening. I could fly out Thursday and come back Sunday morning." "Then do it," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "Come with me. Let me show you my world." So Sophia rearranged her schedule, delegated 2 weddings to her capable assistant, and flew to London with Marcus on Thursday morning. She'd never been to Europe, and watching the city unfold beneath them as they landed made her feel like a kid at Christmas. Marcus's meetings took up most of Friday, but he made time for lunch with her at a pub near his office, and dinner that night at a restaurant overlooking the Thames. Saturday, he took the day off completely, and they played tourist, visiting museums and markets and historic sites, holding hands and taking silly selfies and falling more in love with every moment. "Thank you for coming with me," Marcus said that night as they stood on Westminster Bridge, watching the lights reflect off the river. "Having you here makes everything better." "Thank you for wanting me here," Sophia said, leaning into him. "I'm sorry I freaked out about the traveling. I just need to feel like I'm part of your life, not an afterthought." "You're not an afterthought," Marcus said seriously. "You're the reason I'm thinking about restructuring how I work. Maybe hiring more senior people who can handle the international travel so I can stay closer to home, closer to you." Sophia looked up at him in surprise. "You do that?" "I do a lot of things for you," Marcus said, and then he dropped to one knee right there on Westminster Bridge, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Sophia's heart stopped. "I know this is fast," Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. "I know we've only been together for 2 months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You make me want to be better, to build something real, to create a life that's about more than just work and success. I love you, Sophia Martinez. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Sophia's face, and she couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. So she just nodded, and kept nodding until Marcus was laughing and slipping the ring onto her finger and kissing her while tourists applauded around them. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, I'll marry you." They called their families from the hotel that night, giddy and breathless and unable to stop smiling. Claire screamed so loud that Ryan had to take the phone away from her, and Sophia's father cried as he welcomed Marcus to the family. The next morning, Sophia flew back to manage her Sunday evening wedding, and Marcus flew back Monday after his final meetings. And when he showed up at the wedding venue that night just as Sophia was wrapping up, she ran into his arms like she'd been waiting her whole life for him. "Let me plan our wedding," Sophia said as they drove home, her ring catching the streetlights and sending sparkles across the dashboard. "I was hoping you'd say that," Marcus said. "But I have one request." "What?" "Sunset ceremony," he said with a grin. "I want to marry you at sunset." Sophia laughed, the sound full of joy and love and possibility. "Deal." "But I'm hiring someone else to be the day of coordinator because I want to actually enjoy getting married instead of managing logistics." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "When should we do this?" 6 months, Sophia said immediately. "I can plan a wedding in 6 months with my eyes closed, and I don't want to wait longer than that to marry you." So they set the date for 6 months later, early spring when the flowers were blooming and the weather was perfect. Sophia planned their wedding with the same meticulous attention she gave all her clients, except this time every detail mattered in a different way. This wasn't about creating someone else's perfect day. This was about celebrating the love she'd found when she wasn't even looking for it. Claire was her maid of honor, of course, and Ryan was Marcus's best man, and the symmetry of it made them all laugh. The venue was the same country club where they'd met, where they'd clashed over timelines and sparked instead. And Sophia loved the poetry of starting there forever in the place where they'd begun. The 6 months flew by in a blur of planning and work and building their life together. Marcus restructured his company exactly as he'd promised, promoting senior executives and reducing his travel to only the most critical trips. He bought a house on the outskirts of the city, with space for an art studio for Sophia and a home office for him, and they spent weekends painting walls and choosing furniture and making it theirs. Sophia expanded her business, hiring 2 additional planners to handle more weddings while she focused on high-profile clients and mentoring her team. And every night, no matter how busy they'd been, they made time to have dinner together to talk about their days, to remind each other why they'd chosen this. The morning of their wedding, Sophia woke up with butterflies in her stomach and joy in her heart. She got ready with Claire and her bridesmaids, and when she finally put on her dress, a simple silk gown with delicate beading that caught the light, Claire started crying. "You look so happy," Claire said, hugging her carefully to avoid wrinkling the dress. "Marcus is the luckiest man alive." "I'm the lucky one," Sophia said, meaning it with everything in her. The ceremony was at sunset, just as Marcus had wanted, and as Sophia walked down the aisle toward him, she understood why he'd fought so hard for this timing. The golden light made everything magical, and when Marcus turned to watch her approach, the look on his face made her want to run to him. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises to love and challenge and support each other, to build something that mattered, to create a life full of meaning and joy. And when they were pronounced husband and wife and kissed to thunderous applause, Sophia felt like everything in her life had led to this moment. The reception was perfect, but Sophia barely noticed the details she'd spent months planning. She was too busy dancing with her husband, laughing with their friends, feeling the overwhelming love of everyone who'd come to celebrate with them. "Happy?" Marcus asked as they swayed together during their first dance. "Deliriously," Sophia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "This is everything I never knew I wanted." "Me too," Marcus murmured. "Thank you for threatening me with that binder." Sophia laughed, the sound full of love and joy. "Thank you for being infuriating enough that I wanted to throw it at you." "Best decision I ever made," Marcus said, and kissed her as the guests cheered around them. 2 years later, Sophia stood in the nursery of their home, rocking their 6-month-old daughter to sleep while Marcus finished up a call in his office. Emma had his dark eyes and her determined chin, and Sophia loved her more than she'd thought possible to love anything. "She asleep?" Marcus whispered from the doorway. "Almost," Sophia whispered back, watching Emma's eyes flutter closed. Together they laid her in the crib and tiptoed out of the room, Marcus's arm around Sophia's waist. In the living room, 2 paintings hung on the wall, the terrible abstract pieces they'd created on their first date, framed and displayed like they were masterpieces. "I have news," Marcus said as they settled onto the couch. "The board approved my proposal. I'm transitioning to chairman instead of CEO, which means no more international travel and more time at home." "Really?" Sophia asked, turning to face him. "You do that?" "Emma needs her dad," Marcus said simply. "And I need both of you more than I need to run the company day to day. I'll still be involved in major decisions, but I can do most of it from here." Sophia kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour," Marcus said, pulling her closer. "But I'll never get tired of hearing it." "I love you," Sophia said. "I love the life we've built. I love that you gave up your company to be with your family. I love that you still bring me coffee every morning, and that you paint with me on weekends, and that you make me laugh even when I'm stressed about work." "I love you too," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "I love that you still plan weddings with the same passion you did when we met. I love that you're an incredible mother. I love that you challenged me to be better and loved me enough to let me figure out how." They sat together in the quiet of their home, listening to the peaceful sounds of their daughter sleeping down the hall, and Sophia marveled at how much had changed since that day at the country club, when she'd wanted to throw her binder at the infuriating best man. 5 years after that, Sophia stood in another ceremony space, this time as a guest watching Claire and Ryan renew their vows on their 10th anniversary. Emma was 5 now, a flower girl in a pink dress who took her job very seriously, and their 2-year-old son, Lucas, was toddling around trying to steal cookies from the reception tables. "They're still so in love," Sophia said to Marcus as they watched Claire and Ryan dance, looking at each other like no one else existed. "Just like us," Marcus said, pulling her into his arms for a dance of their own. "Remember when we met at their wedding?" Sophia asked, smiling at the memory. "I wanted to kill you." "I wanted to kiss you," Marcus admitted. "Even when you were yelling at me about timelines, all I could think about was how beautiful you looked when you were angry." "That's because you're insane," Sophia said, laughing. "Insane about you," Marcus corrected, and kissed her as Emma made gagging noises and Lucas tried to climb up Marcus's leg. That night, after they'd put the kids to bed and collapsed on their couch with glasses of wine, Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Sophia a photo. "What's this?" she asked, squinting at the screen. "A property," Marcus said, "in Italy. I'm thinking we could turn it into a retreat center, a place where couples can get married or renew their vows or just celebrate love. You could design the whole thing, plan events there, create something that's entirely yours." Sophia stared at him, her heart swelling with love. "You want to buy me a wedding venue in Italy?" "I want to build something with you," Marcus corrected. "Something that combines what we're both good at. I'll handle the business side, you'll handle the creative side, and we'll create a place that helps people celebrate the kind of love we found." Tears were streaming down Sophia's face, and she kissed him fiercely. "Yes, absolutely yes." So they bought the property, a villa in Tuscany with rolling hills and olive groves and views that looked like paintings. They spent a year renovating it, flying back and forth with the kids, designing every detail to be perfect for couples starting there forever. The Villa Marcus Ashford opened 3 years later, and it quickly became one of the most sought-after wedding destinations in Europe. Sophia ran the planning side, working with a team of local vendors to create magical experiences, while Marcus handled the business operations and continued to oversee his company from their Italian home office. They split their time between Italy and their home back in the States, and their kids grew up bilingual and confident, surrounded by love and beauty and parents who showed them every day what a real partnership looked like. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Sophia back to Westminster Bridge in London, where he'd proposed all those years ago. "I'd do it all again," he said, holding her hand as they watched the Thames flow beneath them. "Every fight, Every challenge, every moment of figuring out how to make this work. I'd choose you every single time. Even when I threatened you with a binder, Sophia teased. Especially then, Marcus said, and kissed her as the London lights sparkled around them. They'd built something that mattered, something that lasted, something that made every challenge worth it. They'd created a life full of love and meaning, raised children who knew they were cherished, helped hundreds of couples celebrate their own love stories. And it had all started with a wedding planner and a best man who'd clashed until sparks flew instead. Sophia couldn't imagine a more perfect story, except that it wasn't a story at all. It was her life, and she was living it with the man who'd seen past her walls to the woman underneath, who'd loved her fiercely and faithfully, who'd built a forever with her one sunset, one painting, one moment at a time. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For being infuriating enough to make me fall in love with you," Sophia said. And they laughed together, the sound echoing across the Thames and into the London night, carrying with it all the joy and love and promise of a future they'd continue building together, one beautiful moment at a time.